So today we are going to look at the legislature, right? And our objective cuts across the following. Most often we have heard about these organs of government. Today we are going to understand them thoroughly, take them out one by one and deal with them accordingly. So we're going to discuss the legislature today. Remember, legislature is a Latin word, Latin derivative, lex legis, law. So legislature basically means the law. So it's the organ of government that makes the law, right? So it's also center of discussion about policies, programs, and ideas of the government. They discuss everything that has to do with the government in the legislature. It's very important. In Nigeria, it's called the National Assembly. It's called the House of the Congress in USA, the Parliament in Britain. I think it's called the Knesset in Israel, and I think Dumas, right? I'm not sure what it's called in Russia. So most countries come up with this fantastic name for their lawmaking bodies, right? So let's see some functions of the legislature. Basically, they make the law, right? They make laws. So when a bill comes into their chambers, they go through it. We're going to see the process of making laws down in this topic. So they represent the people. They are the people's representatives. In Nigeria, for example, the legislatures are elected by the people. Each state is divided into 3 senatorial districts. That makes it 108 from 36 states, plus 1 senatorial district from Abuja. That makes it 109, right? So each state is divided into 3 senatorial districts and then also divided into I think constituencies. So the bigger the state or the bigger in population a state is, the more constituencies they're going to have. All right, so let's take a look. The major function of the legislature is to make its lawmaking from the order and good government of the states. They make laws, basically. They represent the people. We elect them and put them there to make laws on our behalf. Don't forget the topic, indirect or representative democracy. Financial control, they approve budget, they approve spending of the government. They are the ones that give their assent to it. When the government wants to take a loan, it goes through their doorsteps. They also have the power to amend the constitution, right? So the constitution has a procedure for its amendment, which most often starts with the legislature. They have the power and capacity to impeach the president if he commits any serious offense like treason, crime against the nation. They have the power to investigate government ministries and institutions, especially if there are issues that calls for it, like misappropriation of funds and mismanagement, right? So they ratify international treaties the executive government signs. They go through it and ratify it, and the likes. So we have types of legislature. We have the unicameral legislature and we have the bicameral legislature. So what do we mean by unicameral? Uni simply means uno, one. It's a Latin word for one. So it's a type of legislative body which has only one chamber. That means the bicameral house is a type of body that has 2 chambers, the upper house and the lower house, the House of Reps and the House of Senate. The House of Senate is the upper house, while the House of Reps is the lower house. So what are the gains of a unicameral legislature? The process of making law is faster because there is just a little number of people to debate it. It's not going to take time. Therefore, it is cheap to maintain because you are not paying for 380 lawmakers. Is it 360 plus 109? You pay them every month with the allowances. So it makes the process of legislature easy. It's not cumbersome, right? To allocate responsibility is also easier, right? Because it is fewer in number, the members are fewer in number, the process, the whole lawmaking process is made simple, less complex, less cumbersome, right? Now let's look at the demerits. So because they are fewer in number, it doesn't allow for proper debating of bills before they are passed into law, right? And the executive organ of government can easily control them because they are lesser in number. Let's say they are 20. can easily pocket them. So this can lead to dictatorship. See, that's what number 3 is saying. It creates room for the emergence of a dictator, right? It's unpopular because it does not have the principle of checks and balances, where each organ of government watch each other, because it doesn't have the number, right, to do the checks and balances properly, especially on the executive, because the executive can easily pocket them, like we have seen above. Now let's look at the bicameral legislature. So it's made up of 2 houses, the upper house and the lower house, upper chamber, lower chamber, and you see it in countries like Britain, Nigeria, USA, India. So what are the advantages? So the process of making law is thorough because everybody has to go through it, right? And because there is the number, we can also argue that you may have the right people to go through those bills before they turn to become laws. So it provides checks and balances, even on the legislature. The lower house can watch the upper house, and the upper house can watch the lower house. And together or individually, they can watch the executive. See, that's what the third point is saying here. The second chamber can correct the errors and faulty legislations committed by the first chamber. And it will be very difficult for the executive to dominate the lawmaking body, like it will always do in the unicameral house. And because there is number, it allows for equal and adequate representation of the people in the government. So the people tend to believe that this government is our government because their voices is heard at the lawmaking house. So the delay of bills in the 2 chambers gives room for public opinion to be properly expressed. Now, when bills are delayed, like for example, there were some crazy bills that were brought up in Nigeria. I've forgotten some of them. And when it came online, people heard about it. They began making noise. They began disturbing. They began calling in their senators, their respective senators and members of the House of Reps in their areas, that bill should not pass, right? And at the point, these bills are suspended, right? So it's very important that delay is there too. Even though we know it can make the passage of bills very, very slow, but it allows for people to weigh in on those bills as well, right? So let's look at the demerits. The delay in passage of bill, there's a delay in passage of bill, so it slows down the decision-making process. Therefore, wastage of funds and resources maintaining 2 chambers. What the 2 chambers can do, one can do it. And the second chamber is a duplication of the first because they do the same thing. So still wastage of funds and finances. So it can lead to unnecessary rivalry. Both houses can be competing over who's the strongest, who's the most relevant, and the likes. In times of emergency, passing bills can be delayed, and it can kill those moments, right? When the government has to be thinking on the balls of their feet, they are wasting time debating bills. So the second chamber provides a veritable dumping ground for political rejects. People say that most often you go there, you see them sleeping during sessions, right? So some even argue that in some countries, I think like England, one of the chambers is not elected by the people, so it's undemocratic. Actually, if your father is part of that chamber, he can hand over his authority to you when he's resigning. He can hand over his badge, let me use that term, badge, to you. You can continue that process. So the agreement is that this is undemocratic because the people are not the ones picking these representatives themselves. Now let's go into bills. We're going to look at what bills is, types of bills, and how bills are passed into law. So a bill is the proposed law that is to be discussed in the lawmaking house. A proposed law, that means it's going to be a law, is a law in potentiality. It may be because it can be cancelled, right? So when the bill is agreed on by the parliament, it is sent to the executive for assent. So the president will now give his assent to the bill, and the bill will now become a law. So there are 3 kinds of bills. We have the public bill, we have the private member bill, and we have the money bill. So any issue that confronts the country, the entire length and breadth of the nation, we regard this as the public bill. And most often it comes from the executive arm of government to the legislature. It doesn't mean it can't come from elsewhere, but we're just saying. Now, the private member bill is a bill that's introduced by a lawmaker, a legislature. the legislator. Now, the money bill are bills that has to do with how governments spend the money, spend the national, how they manage national finance, budgets, and the likes. So this bill is introduced by the executive arm of government as well. Remember, budgets and the likes falls with the executive organ of government. So how do we pass bills into law? We have the first reading, second reading, committee stage, report stage, third reading, and the assent stage. Now, let's follow these stages. They are easy to understand. Now, in the first reading, a bill is presented by the clerk of the house. A bill that was brought in will be taken by the clerk of the house, and he will now is printed in leaflets and is made available to all the members, right? Everybody should go through it. And then they will now set the date when they're going to review it, second reading. Now, at this moment, the initiator of the bill explains what the bill is all about. Initiator means the person who wrote it or who brought the bill into existence. So this bill is debated, and if it is successful at this stage, it is sent to the committee, right? And if it is not successful, it goes back to whoever brought that bill into existence. Now, a committee is set here to look into that bill, maybe to iron out the nitty-gritty. For example, if it's a bill that has to do with Apapa seaports, everybody in Abuja they may not know what is there. But the government they can set up a committee and send them to Lagos to go and study the seaport and make their investigations. Now, when they make their investigations, they'll definitely get their reports. So after the committee stage, you have the report stage, right? That is why this thing I say it follows from each other. Now, there is a standing committee which has 5 to 6 members, and the committee is headed by the speaker, that means the head of the House of Reps or the head of the House of Senate. So the report stage is where the committee turns in their reports, everything they have discussed, their investigations and the likes. And then this takes us to the third reading. Now, at this stage, the bill is passed or rejected. Now, before this is done, a thorough look will be taken to go through the bill and update the info there. Then a final vote is made. If this bill came from began in the lower house, if it is successful in the lower house, it goes to the upper house, right? So then the assent stage is where the president now takes a good look at the bill, and then it signs it and it becomes a law. Now, if after 30 days the president doesn't, the lawmakers have the capacity to withdraw such a bill back to their office, and they will vote on it again. And if 2/3 of them agree on it, that bill can become a law. So this is a big concept. This what we just did now is huge. So take your time and go through it. If you have any question, feel free to ask. I'm going to prepare to answer it as well.